Okay, welcome everybody. I'm happy to join you and welcome for our coffee hour today. On behalf of the Intercultural Communication Intersection, I would like to welcome you to our coffee hour. The title of our coffee hour is Supporting Your Students in Knowing Themselves and Each Other, a talk on setting mindfulness and mindset in intercultural exchange. And our guest speaker today is Ramin. We will start today's event with an overview of our organization and our events. We will then introduce the speaker for today's coffee hour. And once again, thank you, Ramin, for being our guest speaker today. Just a we would like to record this coffee hour and possibly share the recording on our YouTube channel. So be aware that you are recorded. And I also would like to share the statement from TESOL that we are a safe space and we are encouraged to engage in conversations that sometimes are uncomfortable. So a little bit about our organization. Uh, Many of our team leaders are here, Leslie and Ramin, and also Barbara and Amina, of course, are part of the organization and great supporters. So what is intercultural communication intersection? We are a TESOL intersection, and we are addressing the growing needs of language teachers who engage in intercultural communication, even when they are teaching in their home countries. And we facilitate a wide range of events, such as practice focus webinars, informal coffee hours, academic panels, lighting talks. Um, we have regular newsletter issues and many more. And if you notice the link I added into the chat box, you are welcome to watch our little video that we created about our group. And how you can join us? Well, you can become a member of TESOL International, and you can join us via My TESOL, and you can also follow us on our social media channels. And if you have any questions, any suggestions, you are welcome to email me, especially if you have recommendation for a guest speaker or you would like to join our organization. Please send me an email if that is the best for you. And let's talk about our upcoming events before we talk about Ramin's presentation. So our upcoming events will be in January. We have a panel presentation where we invite teachers to share their experiences related to intercultural communication. And in December, we have a coffee hour that relates to the holidays. And of course, we would like to request your input for events in February. If you have, again, recommendations, please feel free to email me. And with that being said, I would like to introduce our speaker, Ramin. He received his PhD in social, cultural, and international development education studies from Florida State University in 2017, and he is the founder of Full Circle Language Learning and Teaching, which is an organization that offers foreign and second language learning opportunities and various courses online and in person. And he has also published a lot on intercultural communication Um, and he also completed a fellowship with the US State Department in Vietnam. And his presentation, I guess this is my turn to stop talking and allow you to share your screen. So his presentation is once again supporting your students in knowing themselves and each other, a talk on setting mindfulness and mindset in intercultural exchange. Ramin?
Thank you, Andrea. And hello, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, great. So let me just get all my windows situated here. Um, as thank you, Andrea, for the introduction. Hello to all my uh, ICIS TESOL colleagues, as well as other friends and colleagues who I see who that are here. And those two that I don't know, I hope to be able to connect with you and stay connected, and through our different channels, through TESOL or LinkedIn or all these other kinds of network opportunities. So thanks for being here and for taking the time uh, to just learn and hopefully to exchange and share your perspectives as well after I get done talking, and we'll open things up for discussion. So yes, this title here, it's maybe not the sexiest title, but it's accurate, right? And so I want that was the really key, is to attract people like you who are interested in intercultural exchange, and specifically interested in how to design and facilitate intercultural exchanges, and that's really my purpose that I'll get into a little bit more here today, is really just to share with you a series of workshops that I facilitated, and we'll get into that here a little bit more, but just a little bit more about my background that's kind of related to this talk as well. I am very passionate about facilitating intercultural workshops. I think it's something that if I could do that all the time, every day, I would be just like the luckiest guy, in the world. Because as you all know, if you facilitated such exchanges, it's very profound. It's profound for everyone that's involved, and so I think one of my goals here is to encourage all of us to continue the work that we're doing, to encourage you, if you haven't facilitated an intercultural exchange, maybe give you some ideas, right, of how you can approach doing that. And really just for all of us to be, to realize, if you don't realize this already, as educators of language and culture, we're really best suited to facilitate these kinds of exchanges. And so, in my humble opinion, anyway. So that's kind of how I was invited to Dartmouth College. Was through a former colleague of mine at Florida State University, Leslie Wagner. Leslie is now the program officer at the Rockefeller Center for Public Policy and Social Sciences at Dartmouth College. So she's facilitating and organizing events at Dartmouth, at Rockefeller Center for Public Policy, and she invited me to come up and participate in their intercultural workshop series. So with that, let's jump into it. Okay. So yes, this is the overview of what we'll be discussing. Again, the purpose is really I'll get into that in the next slide, but I want to share with you the purpose because I think it's important for you to understand kind of where I'm coming from and what the purpose is of the workshop, of this discussion today. I want to present to you the intercultural workshops with the intention of you copying everything that I did and changing it to fit your context, and to share it, with others that it might benefit. I'll also share with you a little bit about the participants, because obviously that's influenced the workshops as well. The activities, and here I have in parentheses setting and mindset. And so that was something that was intentional, but also emerged as being very important to the workshops. And I also want to share with you student feedback. And the student feedback, I'll give you, a heads up. It's pretty positive, but it's not. I'm not sharing it to brag. Although that's okay to brag too. It's really to, again, to maybe to give you and anyone who you're trying to convince at your school or your organization, your campus, to provide some rationale of how it could be beneficial, right? And why these intercultural exchanges are so important, and that they should be really every day of the year, I think, right? Because we work on big campuses, big organizations with a lot of students, faculty, staff, and really this should, in my opinion, it should be a full-time endeavor. And I think the students' feedback supported that. And as I mentioned here, we'll open it up to a discussion to get your insights, to get your experience, and to ask any questions that you might have as well. Okay, so yeah, I just kind of covered this a little bit already. The purpose here is to share activities, focus on setting and mindset within intercultural activities, present student feedback, discuss these initial findings. Leslie and I are putting together a paper based on our findings from this workshop. So, these kind of coffee hour presentations are provide some extra motivation, right? To get it together and put your ideas together. And so, just want to kind of promote that idea too. If you have a paper that you're procrastinating on and you want some motivation to put your ideas together, these kinds of presentations are helpful to that process. Of course, stimulate ideas and discussion. And as I mentioned before, it's to stimulate ideas and discussion because I I do strongly believe that as educators of language and culture, we are really the best suited to facilitate these kind of intercultural workshops. As teachers, we facilitate intercultural exchange daily, right? With students. As teacher educators, we discuss language and culture daily, and I think that it's as you'll see, I think in the student feedback, you'll see how it's relevant, not just within maybe our bubble of English language teachers or even English language teacher educators, but that these skills, this knowledge that we have, it's really important, outside of those fields, right? That it's very relevant to all different areas of expertise, and I would say even outside of the college campus, where diversity is just everywhere, right? With the diversity, equity, inclusion, you hear those words a lot. And I think we can really serve organizations to explore how to leverage, right, diversity, how to make spaces more equitable and inclusive. So we'll get more into that as well. So a little bit of background of the program and the workshops. So as I mentioned, these were from the campus was Dartmouth College, New Hampshire. Has anyone been to New Hampshire or Dartmouth? It's beautiful. I had never been there before, and I fell in love with the place. As you can see, there were 3 workshops, one in the fall, one in the winter, and the spring. So my first experience was in the fall, and it's absolutely beautiful up there. Okay, so it's a small kind of liberal arts, Ivy League college, and there within the college is the Rockefeller Global Leadership Program. So I'll just read to you a little bit of description that you can find on their website. And it says the description or the kind of mission statement for the Rockefeller Global Leadership Program is to intentionally increase your comfort and understanding of people and cultures who are different in thoughts, beliefs, words, and actions, and learn how to lead by creating a climate of respect. So again, this is kind of merging these two worlds of intercultural studies, global education, and with a focus on leadership. So we'll get into the demographics a little bit more of the students, but I'll tell you right now, most of the students they're at Dartmouth and they're in this program because they're getting into public policy, right? They're getting into government programs. They're working as consultants, right? So they're getting into this world where their influence and their ideas are at the highest level of policy. So the workshops were 1.5 hours each. And the overall goals of the workshops, based on the conversations I had with Leslie and their experience with workshops before, was really threefold. One was to be interactive and participant centered. Right? They had people come in and kind of give long talks, and that could be useful on a certain level. But she really requested being having workshops being interactive as possible and participant centered as possible, which was fine with me because that's my style anyway for workshops. Maybe that's why she invited me. Also, the design, setting, and activities to foster open and non-judgmental reflection and exchange. And we'll see kind of how we implemented that. And also a focus on student well-being. So we got to remember that this was in the darker days still of COVID, right? So there was a lot of stress. There's a lot of stress always on these campuses, but students were just starting to come back to campus. There was anxiety there, as you'll see in some images that I'll share. We were all still wearing masks. So a focus on student well-being was, I think, is always the a goal of exchanges. But I think given COVID and all the stress and anxiety that students and faculty have been experiencing, it made that even that much more important and come to the surface even that much more, which is actually a silver lining, I think, with COVID. So let's go on. So the workshop theme that we came up with was diving deeper into culture, identity, and communication. And I'll give $10 to anybody who can tell me who that man is that's diving underneath the ice. You can type it in there, and I'll keep going. But the workshop thing is diving deeper into culture, identity, communication. And the objectives that we developed were to take on the position of another culture perspective through role play, analyze how one's identities have been and are being shaped through a mindfulness activity, and analyze how culture and identity informs expectations of communication, leadership through pair and group discussion. So you can see how we're trying to merge kind of our goals or the situation that was at hand, and and creating these objectives. So Leslie said that is not me. That's actually a gentleman. His name is Wim Hof. Have anyone ever heard of Wim Hof? Wim Hof is a gentleman. They call him the Iceman. As you can see, that's under an iceberg. That's under the ice. Okay, so that, and he's not wearing a wetsuit, and he's holding his breath. He has broken all these world records for breath holds, for cold exposure, for all these things. What he's most well known for now is through these kind of breathing exercises, really for wellness and for lowering stress. So if you're interested a little bit more, we're not going to talk about Wim Hof today, but that was an inspiration and influence on me and on these workshops. And I thought that the imagery there, so much we'll talk about the cultural iceberg, right? We use that so much, that image of we're seeing things on the surface versus what's below the surface. So I thought that kind of all came together. No, it's not Henry Bogart, Barbara, but good guess. Good guess. Okay, so some pre-workshop questions. So before I met with the students, we sent them these pre-workshop questions. And these were really to assess kind of what they know, what their experiences are, for me to learn who these students are. I had never met them before. And also to kind of get them curious and primed for the workshops. So I think it's always a good idea if we can do this pre-workshop, just to kind of, for those reasons, right? Get to know the students a bit, get them thinking a bit, right, around the topics that we're going to be exploring in the workshops, and they're not coming in cold. And it was important for me to assess, because we were doing some things that might be new and might need to involve some vulnerability, right? So I kind of always like to let students know that that's coming, so they're not caught off guard. I think the students in this case, they're in this global leadership program. They kind of signed up for it, and they had been exposed to different workshops before. So I think that's important to keep in mind as well. But as you can see here, the pre-workshop questions were to understand what their expectations were, how they define intercultural communication, what are some ways that they explore and express culture in their lives, how comfortable do they feel about sharing with the group about personal life experiences, and also, do they engage in any kind of meditation or mindfulness practice? So let me ask you all, since we have the chat here, let me know if you engage in any mindfulness practice, just yes or no. You can put in the chat, and if yes, how often, weekly, right? So you can please, if you can share that in the chat, that would be helpful to me. All right. So just really quickly, actually, let me go back here to this, the pre-workshop questions, really quickly. What they hope to learn from the workshop, I think what was kind of spanned a lot of different topics, but it was really kind of focused on how to engage with otherness, right? A bit more appropriately. Definitions of intercultural communication, they were very good at providing kind of academic definitions, because they had been exposed to them. Some specific ways that they explore and express culture, as we'll see in the next slide, it's a very diverse group of students. So they're very much exposed to culture is very central and to their identities, and dealing with like cultural difference is very frequent in their life. How comfortable do they feel about sharing? Everyone was comfortable to very comfortable. And as far as, do you engage in any kind of meditation or mindfulness practice? The majority said no. A few did say yes through yoga, some through some kind of meditation, but that was the minority of classes. I'm going to just check our group here. So we have rarely, yes, daily yoga and mindfulness. So 4 times a week, some breathing exercises to manage class behavior. Okay, fantastic, very interesting, great. I hopefully I can leave some time for discussion to learn from you all as well. Okay, let's continue then. So the setting, actually, did I skip a slide? Oh, yes, I did. Okay, so here are the students. Just really quickly, you can kind of look over this. Undergraduate students, but you can see that 14 have citizenship in another country or dual citizenship. Some 9 listed their home country other than the United States. Again, majority are government and economic majors. So there were 2 main activities, okay? Actually, I would say 3 main activities. The first was a dinner activity. The second was a mindfulness activity. And the third was a more focused kind of traditional discussion pair intercultural exchange kind of activity. So the first activity here was this dinner activity. And it was a beautiful conference room with mobile desk and chairs. We could slide the chairs and desks together. As you can see, we put them together here and we were able to kind of move them as needed. I asked students to take off their shoes. We actually put a sign at the front door, and I did that intentionally. I did that for them to kind of have a sense of they're entering in a different space, right? And I think that that can be an interesting, technique to apply. Also because, I came from a Persian household. That's something that you did when you entered in like a home. Okay, so you take off your shoes. And so I wanted to give them that sense of like maybe doing something that might be different to them, but that was definitely different on a campus setting, right? And I think those kind of shifts, those kind of signals help to put participants in a different state. So also had background music going on. There's adjustable lighting. You can see that from that image. The lighting's nice. When students came in, I welcomed them and I chatted with them. Okay, so I think that was also a very important, that's just kind of part of my personality, but I think it's also very important so students can start to feel like a sense of ease, get to know me a bit more. I'm asking them to be vulnerable, right? So the more they can feel comfortable with me, the better. I also was intentional about recognizing and honoring the history of the land and the people of the area. So this is, like everywhere, in the world, it has its history, it has its ancestry, it has its trauma. And so I thought that that was important for me to do some research on the area. That in this case, it was Hanover, New Hampshire. Okay, that's where Dartmouth is. And so I think that makes a difference that people can see that you did a little research, that you are. I think the history of the campus of the town of New Hampshire with slavery, with its treatment of like the indigenous peoples. I think that's something that the students it's very important to students. I think it's very important to the campus. That's something that I observed. And again, it just kind of it also recognizes the diversity of culture that exists everywhere, right? And putting our kind of like mindset into that, like, okay, we're coming wherever you are. Let's consider the ancestry, the cultures that contributed to the space, which in this case was a beautiful college campus, right? That campus was built by people, okay, and that center was developed by people, and so taking some time to recognize who those people are, the diversity in those people, I think kind of makes a difference. I also I also provided a short lecture on the cultural iceberg and a rationale, and as well as we engaged in a role play dinner activity that I'll share with you. So, and it was Thai food if you're interested. Okay, so the as I was saying here, culture is like an iceberg theme. So I didn't want to turn this into a big like lecture, academic lecture on intercultural competence, and but I did feel like it was important just for them to reinforce and to remind students that we have surface level kind of culture, but the intention of the workshop was to dive deeper, right? Was to get deeper and to explore these more invisible aspects of really of culture, but really of ourselves. And so this is a theme that I came up with. It kind of emerged from the developing of these workshops, and it's before kind of getting into intercultural exchange, um, I feel like it was important for us to understand that we kind of have to like explore some our inner culture, right? And engage in activities that help us to engage in conversations and reflection, analysis of who we are, okay, and what our identities are. So I don't know if I heard this from something or if it was from inspired from the beautiful nature of Hanover, New Hampshire. But as I was preparing for the lecture for this first workshop, this kind of idea came, and it was when we improve our ability to understand, communicate, love, and lead ourselves, we improve our ability to do that for others as well. So this was an intention that I shared with the students, uh, that really gets to the heart, I think, of the workshops, right? It's really kind of self-knowledge, self-awareness, and then with that, you can kind of become more open to sharing, what that is, what you're reflecting on, as well as being open for other people to kind of share their identities, their perspectives, about things. So I dare say that it's probably pretty rare for students. It was, definitely nothing I experienced as a student, and I think it's rare for students to have these experiences where they get an opportunity to engage in self-reflection, and even to engage in kind of understandings of how they view themselves, and their identities and their cultures, and for them to have some time to actually share that. So these students have been together for the duration of the whole year or the semester. They go through this whole program together, and and I think that you can probably relate, like in a lot of our classes, we can sit next to someone all semester. You might not even know their name. Even if you do know their name, you probably know them on a very surface level. And that's true for the professor as well. Okay, so I think this is an issue that these kind of intercultural opportunities for intercultural exchange, they don't necessarily have to be in a workshop. They can be integrated, okay, into our everyday kind of classrooms, and they don't have to be once. I think they can be, daily or weekly even. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Now for the role play, for the dinner role play activity, these cards, we developed these cards, okay, and then yes, these cards are overgeneralizations, but we that's okay. It's okay to overgeneralize sometimes, right? And it's, as long as you preface it in that kind of way. But I think they're reasonable overgeneralizations. And so the idea came in from the fact, it was inspired by one, for these workshops, they always have a dinner. And they have a dinner with the facilitator and with the students. And I thought that was kind of like a waste of time. I said, well, let's try to integrate those two things, where the dinner is actually an activity. So so we came up with this. This was also inspired by Barnga. Does anyone remember that game, Barnga? Okay, if you don't know what that game is, check it out. It's a simulation game where basically you have cards. Everyone gets dealt cards, but every kind of group and everyone within the group actually, every different group has a different set of rules. And then you start mixing up the different groups, and everyone starts to kind of like, you can't talk. And so you start to like move groups, and you're coming with these set of rules that don't match other people. And then there starts to be like mistrust, there starts to be like anger, there starts to be, suspicion. People start to kind of like form tribes, if you came from, had the same rules. So anyway, it was basically inspired by Barnga. So I said, okay, what can we do to kind of bring these two together? Well, this is where we developed these cards, and each student had a card. So we split the students up into groups, and each student had a card. And so you can just kind of read over these cards a little bit. And the example that we were trying to also get them used to is to take on like another kind of position, right? If they're going to go and live in another country or culture, okay, what's one kind of obvious thing that they have to do, and that is adjust to kind of eating habits, right? Or eating norms around the dinner table. And that's something that you can do even wherever you are. If you're eating with someone from a different, background, different experience, you can at least engage in that conversation. And so this helped to kind of stimulate that kind of exchange. So the rules of this were that they can't share their card. They have to apply the etiquette on their card to the best of their ability, as if it was their own cultural practice. They also have to observe how they think and feel when applying the etiquette. They have to observe others at the dinner table, as well as observe how they think and feel about them and their etiquette. So this is starting to engage in like in observation, obviously. Okay, it's starting to observe like, well, how do you feel about something? How do you feel about this etiquette? Is it uncomfortable? Is it, looking around, or other people doing things that might be considered different, or strange? And then to start to observe how they think about other people when the habits and behaviors of other people, when the behaviors of other people don't match, right, with their kind of expectations, or what, in this case, what's on their card. So this was after we engaged in it was about a 20-minute dinner activity. We got into a discussion, right? So the discussion was, how did you feel about people applying a similar etiquette, and how did you feel about people applying different etiquette? And this was something that we discussed, but I think the value of this ended up being, it prompted students to reflect on their own norms growing up, on what their expectations were around the dinner table. And it's something that they never had really shared, in public before. And there was a pretty big, wide, diversity of practices that was just interesting. It was interesting for the participants to reflect on, and it was interesting for the participants to learn about. And so let's see what the students had to say about the activity. So, I really enjoyed the role play dinner. Doing that with a group, within a group context, remove a lot of discomfort and feeling alienated when trying new things and engaging with differences. Another student said this was super fun. I experienced a lot of these things in my day-to-day life. Not that I mind, but it was nice to have a structured activity to see people realize these things as it was happening. So this was someone who was new to the U.S., deals with a lot of different cultural differences, and appreciated other people kind of realizing that there are differences in how people might eat, and expectations around, in this case, the dinner table. And so I absolutely loved the dinner activity as it felt like an authentic, entertaining, and enjoyable simulation that taught us a lot without feeling fake. Another said, I think it was interesting to see other cultural practices with food being played out and relating them to my own. I also like trying to adhere to the cultural norms of a different culture. So that was something that was just enjoyable, right? To try things out. As you read, some things were like eating with your hands. Others were, using chopsticks. Others were saying grace, before a meal. So when you're engaging in role play, it kind of gives you permission, right, to act out something, right, to pretend. And that's just, it almost gives you permission to put on a mask and try something out, which I think the students appreciated. The last quote here is the meal activity was also illuminating for me because I realized some of my responses to others' actions might be considered rude and vice versa. So again, it's giving some awareness that might not have been there before, right? That something that might be natural for one person might be actually considered rude for another. And that was especially true when when someone had a card that said you don't start eating until maybe the elder right at the table is served first, or you wait till everyone starts eating first. I've lived here in Istanbul, Turkey. That's something that I observe, and that's definitely a practice. Is like you wait right for everyone to kind of sit down before you start eating. So it's like a kind of a group activity. Um, and it's also true with with the eldest at the tables, making sure they're taken care of before anybody else. Okay, let me just look at the chat here really quickly. I'm going to read Henda's joke here. So I'm from Tunisia, but after this webinar, I'm having second thoughts because I tend to refuse food the first time around. So I might as well be Iranian. You might be. All right. So okay, and then Iman says, here I think participants would behave in the conventional way and what is expected from them rather than being themselves as unique individuals. So, um, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm not quite sure what that comment means. Maybe we can discuss it in the discussion. All right. So the next activity is this mindfulness activity. Okay, Leslie, so you can get your pillow ready. All right. And and this mindfulness activity, first let's just define what one definition of what mindfulness is. So mindfulness is defined by John Kabat-Zinn is paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So if you don't know who John Kabat-Zinn is, he's an American professor emeritus of medicine and the creator of the Stress Reduction Clinic and this at the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society at UMass Medical School. So we can see from this definition of mindfulness, it can be exercised in many different ways, right? It can be through just focusing on our breathing, focusing on our walking, right? Our cooking, if we're playing music, and focusing how we're conversing, but in a more intentional and meta way, where we take the role of the observer of our actions, emotions, and the world around us. So it's from this vantage point that we can more clearly see the bigger picture of and meaning of ourselves, of anything we're engaging in, and potentially creative solutions to challenges. So if we see here, this is actually supported in the research in neuroscience and psychology. So if we see this these wave patterns here, okay, these are actually brainwave patterns. And so these brainwave patterns are labeled as gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. So generally, when we're right now, we're probably in this kind of like beta. I might even be in this gamma, okay, because I'm explaining to you, I'm really trying to focus and concentrate and be articulate. Um, and you all were probably in this kind of beta. You're engaged. You might be kind of multitasking. You're active, right? You're listening to me. You're living your best life, right? You're doing what you need to do. And so that's the beta, and that's what students are coming into the workshop with. Now, when we shift to an alpha, you can see how it slows down a bit. So if we can think about beta as like a flashlight, okay, and the flashlight is like focusing on something. Now, if you're in a dark room and you have a flashlight, it doesn't illuminate the whole room, it just is where you're kind of pointing it, right? The alpha brainwave is thinking about this as like a floodlight. And now it's a light that's illuminating more of the room, let's say. Okay. Now this is only possible when we kind of are more relaxed. This is when we become more reflective. When we're in a more restful state, we can kind of let go, right? We can let go of like what we're doing at the moment. We can let go of focusing on an email or a conversation or listening to someone and trying to concentrate. We can just kind of let it go for a moment. And so this is where you can, I think it's the ideal state for engaging in a reflective practice. And so in all kind of models of intercultural development, there's initial focus on like your attitude, your state of being, and also on just like analysis of yourself, right? Self-awareness, self-knowledge. And what I see that's kind of lacking in the research and in the actually and even like the practice of intercultural exchanges is this point here. We kind of just expect people to like jump in, be reflective, and be vulnerable and kind of like engage, in this exchange. And I think students and just all participants need a little bit of like easing into it. Okay. And so this is a way that we can get participants in our intercultural workshops, in our classrooms, to get into this alpha state that allows us to be more reflective, to see the bigger picture of things, to relax, okay? And to also open up and be more vulnerable. So if you can create a space, where you've created a safe space, we discuss mindfulness, and we discuss a key word in mindfulness, and that's to be non-judgmental. So you practice being non-judgmental first to yourself as you are analyzing your thoughts, as you see your emotions come up, right? We can often engage in a lot of judgment. Oh man, I shouldn't be thinking. What am I doing? Oh God, I'm so hungry. Oh, I shouldn't be thinking how hungry I am. Oh, I have all these things to do. I have a test. I have this I have to do. I have this presentation that's coming up. I mean, our minds are just built like that. And that's fine. That means that we're alive. That's a good thing. All right. So that's nothing we're trying to get rid of, right? The intention here is not to have no thoughts. The intention here is to be observer, okay, and not be caught up in those thoughts. So this is where the mindfulness practice comes in. And so this is where we started. So after giving that kind of explanation, I instructed the participants in this way. And if you are in a space where you can participate, I invite you just to participate, right? And I'll guide you through the mindfulness activity that we engaged in so you can experience it. And what better way than to experience something, right? To kind of understand it a little bit more deeply. So I invite you to, if you're sitting down, that's fine. If you're in a place where you want to lie down, that's okay too. So the students in our workshop, some of them, laid down on the floor. Some of them just got comfortable in their chair. So I want to invite you to sit or lie down and close your eyes. If you're in a place where you can close your eyes, hopefully no one's driving. I'm going to close my eyes as well. So I just want you to notice a shift in how you're feeling. Now that we've closed our eyes, we're shutting out the external world. How does that feel? Again, practicing a non-judgmental mindset. I want you to just observe your breathing, your heart rhythm, non-judgmentally, just observing. I'd like to invite you to take a deep breath in through your nose and into your belly, and out through your mouth. Repeating that a couple of more times. In through your nose, into your belly. Observing how that might feel. If there's any thoughts that might come up, just recognize them, observe them, just let them pass. I'll lead you into a brief scan, body scan. Starting with your eyes. Bringing your attention to your eyes, how they feel as they're closed and they're relaxed. To your jaw, free to move around your jaw if that helps to relax your jaw a little bit. Down to your neck, your shoulders. Bring a little movement there, a little relaxation. Down your arms and your wrists and your hands, making them heavy and relaxed. Your chest and your belly. Breathing into your belly, feeling your lower back just relax. Letting go of any tension. Bringing that awareness to your legs, your thighs, your knees, your calves, your feet and toes. Just feeling your entire self, your body. Just taking a moment to have an internal reflection, even giving some gratitude to your body for all it does for us. Noticing how you feel, relaxing even a little bit more. Remembering that we can pretty instantly get into this state, this alpha state of relaxation fairly quickly at any moment. Just taking another deep breath in, out. And in this space, I want you to recognize and honor the diversity within your family. I'd like you to reflect on your ancestry. So, what is your identity based on your family ancestry? And what feelings and thoughts come up around this identity when you think about family, traditions, customs that you grew up with? Again, non judgmentally, just observing. Now, recognizing and honoring your diverse identities, your personality, your authenticity. What are these identities? What created and formed these identities? And what do you love about yourself that you might want to share with others and feel that's important that they know about you? And the third reflection is recognizing and honoring what you wish to become. What is this identity? What informs and influences this identity? Does this identity align with who you perceive yourself to already be? Taking another deep breath in and out, whether you have your eyes open or closed. Coming back. Hope you all enjoyed that. Hope you're feeling a little bit more relaxed from that. So that was a little bit more sped up, but that was the idea, okay, of the mindfulness activity. And so from there, um, I asked students to journal, and they engaged in just about 5 minutes, right, to journal about what they experienced, what came up for them. And that could just be notes, nothing full paragraph, just things that was going to prepare them a bit for the next activity, which was a discussion activity. So before we get to that last activity, I want just to share some of the feedback on the mindfulness activity. One student said, I really enjoyed the meditation aspect of the session and the journal reflection. It made me inspired to write in my own journal more often. The meditation was peaceful It was very helpful to reflect on my ancestry, what I like about it, and what I want to change. The meditation section was much appreciated. I really enjoy being able to reflect on my own experiences and values during the sessions. I also feel like there's a lot I've taken away from this session that I can now think about in my own time. I really enjoyed the quiet, reflective activity. It made me think a lot. I like the mindfulness meditation and learning about the different waves, beta versus alpha versus gamma, and that the meditation was calming. So from there, we transitioned into this mindful intercultural exchange. So Nicole, I'm just reading your comment here. The activity, I would say, so the whole workshop we had was an hour and a half. So I'd say this was just about 10 minutes for the meditation, okay? It doesn't have to be long. So I asked students to take on the position of an observer and listener, to hold off judgment of self and others, and that each person should share one identity of their choice while others listen for 5 minutes. So this was also due to the fact that we had a time constraint. After the 5 minutes, whoever was listening, whether that was a pair group or a small group of 3, they can ask a question or share one way they relate after the person has spoken. So each person got an opportunity to share one of their identities that they reflected on. And here was some of the student feedback. I think this was the most kind of interesting. Said, I love the different aspects of identity we had to consider and loved sharing it with everyone. I got to learn a lot about my fellow cohort and share some things they don't know about me. Fun. So these were some people that they went through. This is the last workshop in the semester. I love talking about myself and how my experiences and culture have shaped me to be who I am today. I liked hearing from peers and getting to know who they are and why they are themselves. It was so nice to have deeper conversations with the people around me. I liked listening to the stories of my peers. It was very insightful. I really liked how casual our conversations were because it helped me better connect with my group and opened us up to talk about more vulnerable topics that discuss more than surface level ideas, but incorporate our own live experiences, which was valuable. This was my favorite session. It was amazing to be able to connect with our peers and really get to know them on a more personal level. And lastly, I loved how in-depth everyone in my group got. I truly learned so much about my peers, which allowed me to share so much more about my own identity. So again, these are students that had been working with each other all semester, and these kind of activities help them to feel more comfortable with, being vulnerable and exchanging, as well as learning about each other. I learned a little bit more about how easy it can be to share more about myself to others. I love the in-depth conversations. I feel like I got to know the other students at a deeper level. It was interesting talking with my partner about ancestors. So lastly, some additional feedback. Taking off my shoes made the session feel close and homey. The content today helped me feel more secure and accepted in my journey by providing a space to talk about it with understanding and open others. I enjoyed that this was very engaging and it was a lesson from beginning to end, including our mealtime. This was so unique and I really liked it. It was my favorite session. I liked that it was interactive and vulnerable. So as we engage now in our discussion, just some kind of observations from the student feedback that I think that's useful for us. One, a need for facilitation and guidance. Okay, this doesn't happen on its own. So I hope that's the number one thing, to take away from this, that us as educators, as intercultural educators, as educators of language and culture, we are equipped to do this. We do it. It's so natural, I think, to us that we forget that it's a superpower. But it is, and it's needed, okay? The second is an appreciation of experiential learning. So actually engaging in these kind of activities, in role play activities, in mindfulness activities, in reflective activities, in activities where students can engage with each other in a safe, non-judgmental way, is appreciated. Also, opportunities just to relax and to reflect. I mean, student well-being is so important. Teacher well-being, just well-being, okay, is so critical. And sometimes we don't realize it until we kind of engage in these opportunities just to relax and reflect. So, I read in the chat that some of you engage in this actually in the classroom on a weekly basis. I think that's fantastic. And I would encourage all of you all to engage in some kind of way, whether you're teaching online, in class. I've been engaging and I've integrated these kind of guided reflective activities, mindfulness activities with breathing, with reflection, and an online class that I have designed and I'm teaching for adult ESOL teachers. And so again, go back to the neuroscience, right? It's just engaging our brainwave patterns to be able to be in a mind state where we can reflect and we see the bigger picture, can see more creative solutions, and then we can see ourselves more clearly, right? We're so much in the external world. How often do we close our eyes only to go to sleep or take a nap? But to do it intentionally and to do it in a way that allows us to live a more analyzed life. It really gives us tools that we can apply to our lives, and it gives students and young people tools that allows them to kind of manage their emotions, manage their thoughts, and it's such a useful tool set that's really it's a couple of breaths away, and it's something that we can facilitate and kind of instill in our classrooms, integrate them to what we're doing, and apply these kind of techniques to engage students in reflection, so that when they do share, it's at a deeper level. So with that, let me see here. A couple of resources, okay, and I'm actually going to copy and paste these into the chat, a couple of them. So they're not a lot of resources, but they were key to these workshops, and you might find them interesting. The first here is Search Inside Yourself. It's a great book. It has a lot of mindfulness activities. It really kind of fit for the context, which was this kind of leadership approach. And it's from one of the founders of one of the first hires at Google. Okay, he's a Google engineer. And so coming at it from kind of like an approach that is an engineering approach, right? Just kind of like what are the things that are going to be effective in helping us to really just define happiness, right? And through that happiness, that'll lead us to success. So the other is How Meditation Works and Science-Based Effective Methods. It's from a gentleman. It's a neuroscience professor at Stanford. Huberman Lab podcast. He really gets into the science of meditation and different kinds of meditation. Of course, it's just a slice of the pie, but it's very interesting. And this last one here, Finding Your Focus and Owning Your Attention. That's actually from a professor, Dr. Amishi Jha from the University of Miami. And she talks a lot about how mindfulness is being applied in her work around trauma. So that's it for me. I wanted to just kind of open it up for questions, for comments, for contributions from you all.
Thank you, Ramin. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box or ask them.
I'm just reading here one from Henda. She made a comment, or Henda made a comment about people only open up to you once they feel you're genuinely empathetic towards them. I think you're right on about that. And I think that's another superpower that we have as educators is where we are empathetic and it's authentic. And so that does create the space and the tone for these kinds of for students being more empathetic and for creating an environment that is a safe space and is a non-judgmental space. Yeah, Nicole, I wish there was less positive feedback. And and I don't know if that's I don't know why there wasn't. I like critical feedback, and so um, I would say that I was a little bit surprised that maybe it was a number of things. Maybe because the students were so open to it. Again, they were in this global leadership program. They were engaged in these kind of intercultural workshops throughout the semester. Um, but no, not really. That was all the feedback that I shared was everything from the cohort. Now, I will say that in other contexts, I've had participants struggle with the vulnerability. And that's something to keep in mind that not everyone might feel comfortable with reflecting because that's something that maybe they don't do often, and then sharing that, okay, with others. So I think that's where, as facilitators, things like a pre-survey just to kind of prime them, really setting the space, for participants to feel comfortable. And I think that's what the dinner activity did in this way. It really was like a way just to enjoy a meal, to just talk and chat, to have fun in the role play, right? And then the next activity being the mindfulness activity, everyone's engaged in that. And then they weren't expected to share with the whole group. They were only expected to share what they wanted to. Within really, it was a pair activity. I think a couple of times it was a pair activity, and sometimes there were groups of three. Um, so I don't think that was an issue as much, but I think it's worth keeping in mind when you're designing and facilitating intercultural workshops. Amina says many of these. Let me see. Many of these mindfulness activities are popular in theater. Yes, I think theater has a lot of activities that we can that are useful in the language classroom. Um, I'm seeing here from, excuse me, from Mariana, a helpful metaphor that I learned from George Lackey for setting the space is building the container so that it can hold everything that comes up. That's a great quote. Yeah, I think that building the container is, let me say something about that too. I think that also building the container is working on ourselves as educators. And so when we can engage in these kinds of reflective practices ourselves, especially if we're intending to facilitate them, I think that comes through as it helps to develop the skills of empathy, right? I think that these attitudes, we generally like separate attitudes and skills, but attitudes are actually skills. And so you can, and I say that because you can develop them as skills. You can become a more empathetic person. You can become a better listener. Okay, those are things that you can apply. You can observe in other people. You can apply. Yes, it might be, I don't know, feels like you're faking it at first, but it eventually becomes part of who you are. And so I think that's a really important aspect of that third reflection about who are you becoming. And so it's reflecting on our family ancestry that influences so much our culture, our upbringing, our communities. Um, it takes into consideration our personality, our individual identities, right? Um, but it also is important to understand that we can control and mold who we are, and we can do that in an intentional kind of way by envisioning, how we want to be, where we want to go. I found that to be especially important with these students at Dartmouth that it seemed to me tended to come from backgrounds where a lot of people have very high expectations of what they should do in life. And so I think it's really important for them to at least be aware, of that, and to see how does that make them feel. Is what they have been told that they should do, does that align with who they are and what they want to do? And so I think they're at a critical moment, for really intentionally thinking about those things, and also, coming to a point where they feel comfortable with also understanding that we are always becoming, right? That we're not stuck in a certain identity, that and that there's agency there as well. So I think that these kinds of reflective activities are tools that we can apply towards that process. Okay, and
Ramin, we have another
yes.
question
Mhm.
from Amina. When students were asked to reflect on their identities, which identity clusters were more commonly discussed? Were these the visible or the invisible identities more discussed?
Well, I think that they were all invisible identities, right? So I think it be due to the nature of that's what we reflected on. So I didn't capture that as far as like did they choose identity, ancestry identity, personality identity, or future kind of identity. I didn't capture that. I think that's a great question and something to consider. What in just my observations, um, it was pretty spread out. I think some participants really appreciated the focus on ancestry because they didn't really like reflect on that too much. Some appreciated sharing aspects of who they are and their personality because people often just look at them based on what they look like or what their name is. So they felt, kind of liberated that they could share something about, who they are that's separate from maybe their cultural identity, right? And I think that some really appreciated just being able to reflect on, what they want to do in life, and that's I think that's just kind of like a lifelong kind of reflection. I think we're all still reflecting on what we want to do in life. So being comfortable with that is a good thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just seeing here, Amina, you said, I noticed the feedback had a common theme, connecting personally with peers So it started about the big C, yeah, food etiquette, and led to, yeah, more person to person relatedness. Yeah, absolutely, Amina. In that way, for sure. I think the dinner activity was kind of more, surface level, right, behaviors. Um, but then in discussion, it got very much quickly into like why those are important, and why students very naturally kind of segued into sharing how they related to that from their own upbringing. And then through facility, I help to kind of ask them why, why is that important, and just also encourage them to kind of like engage and apply and engage in those kind of discussions um, with their friends. I don't know if they're going to do that, but that would be ideal of getting them to share. I think also something that came up too, given that it was a leadership program, is that as leaders, that if they can engage with their coworkers, um, wherever they're working, whether it's an organization or a consulting company, or whatever it is, and they're able to express who they are, and actually lead and facilitate these kinds of reflective activities and discussions with their coworkers and colleagues, that's an aspect of leadership, right? That they can bring as professionals. And so, really, I guess like the idea is uh, to train students to become facilitators of intercultural exchanges, themselves, and I, being comfortable with discussing, with seeing that these below the surface expectations that people have of communication, of behavior. I mean, we're seeing that on a huge level now. I mean, you read the news and you see Elon Musk's like approach to Twitter, his hard management style, no empathy, zero empathy there, right? And how that's affecting people. So, within these kind of programs where students and also understanding leadership doesn't have to be top down, that there can be collective leadership, right? And that's a big part of being a leader, is really setting the stage for others to contribute and feeling comfortable to contribute their ideas. So I think that's really important for students to keep in mind too. And I think that's the research also. There's, I think her name is Dr. Jill Harris at Harvard, a business school, is really has been doing a lot of work on collective leadership. And you have companies like Pixar that really have that as their model um, for their how they do business. So you might not have a vision, of how you want to do something. And when you don't have a vision, when you don't know the answer to something, you need different perspectives and you need people to contribute. And so, creating a space where people feel valued, where they can share their voice and they can share things vulnerable. Ideas can be scary, to share, right? And so, if you can build confidence and you can build that skill set to where people can feel more comfortable with sharing ideas and aspects of their themselves, that's vulnerability. So if you can get them comfortable with doing that, they're going to be more confident to do so. And that's really what, any kind of organization can benefit from. And then Nicole says, I mentioned collective leadership is hard when someone comes from an individualistic culture. Absolutely. And that's where, again, it comes with this is where we have to, if you come from an individualistic culture like the United States, that is going to be a muscle to exercise. right? And that's going to be something to where, um, you know, but it's a skill that can be developed, and so practicing these skills of just listening, of asking people, what they think about things, and just taking a different approach, and not always thinking that you have to be the kind of gun ho kind of leader of things. I think would be good for students, particularly in the United States, particularly who might come from, had grown up in that, in kind of individualistic cultures. That's a great point, Nicole. And I think vice versa, if you come from a collectivist culture, you're going to have to exercise your muscle of sharing your voice, right? And knowing that that's the expectation of an organization or group that has those kinds of expectations of their whoever's involved in that organization to speak up. Because if you're just waiting for someone to call on you, it's never going to happen, right? So that's something that a lot of our students who come from collectivist cultures have to practice in the classroom. And that's why, as educators, discussing these things as far as expectations of teaching and learning is really first week in the syllabus, right? Of having those discussions, practicing them, discussing with students what guiding them in these kind of reflective activities for them to share. How do they feel about participating in class, about sharing their ideas, about being vulnerable and taking risks, getting that out in the open, so taking those below the surface aspects of culture, bringing them to the surface, and then saying, hey, these are the expectations that I have, and this is why it's important for you to share your ideas. So, often that's never done. That's so rarely done. Maybe 1% of educators probably do that, where it just takes the time to discuss what are the expectations of learning and teaching, of engagement in the classroom. We just expect students to kind of know. And I never knew, from one professor to the next, what their expectations were until like the semester was almost over. So again, I encourage us to not only think about these as workshops that we engage in, but that, we integrate them in our practice, whatever capacity that might be.
Thank you, Ramin. We appreciate your workshop from today. I would like to share my screen.
Sure.
Um, so thank you everybody for attending. Special thanks to Ramin for offering this very interesting. Not it wasn't a workshop. It was a coffee hour, which is an informal discussion. I know that it was longer than an hour, so we are grateful for those of you who were able to stay for the whole time. Thank you once again. Please follow us on social media. If you would like to be more involved, feel free to join us on Mighty Soul. If you have a recommendation for a guest speaker, or you would like to email me, my email is included in this slide. Feel free to reach out. And we hope to see you at our future events. Thank you. Bye all.